accuse her of other men and stuff, and she wasn't doing nothing. That Sunday night, and had Deja come out, and he picked her up and took her somewhere, wherever that hotel was.
Tells me that they are glad that this arrest has been made because they are now a step closer to getting justice for.
In the quiet heart of Kansas City, Missouri, a tragedy unfolded in 2016 that would leave the community shaken and searching for answers. It was the story of Deja Bosby, a bright, determined, and compassionate young woman with her entire future ahead of her. And it was also the story of her father, Jerry Bosby, a man with a long history of personal struggles, substance abuse, and violent behavior. This case, while heartbreaking, is not just a story of loss. It is a lesson in the importance of prevention, awareness, and listening to warning signs before it is too late. In this documentary, we will retrace Deja's life, her achievements, the investigation that led to her father's conviction, and the critical lessons that families, educators, and communities can learn to help prevent similar tragedies in the future. Deja Bosby was born on September 23, 1997, in Kansas City, Missouri. She was the second of 4 children to her mother, Lita, and father, Jerry. From the very beginning, Deja stood out. Teachers, friends, and family described her as curious, energetic, and kind-hearted, with a smile that could light up any room. She loved music, singing, dancing, and spending time with her siblings. And even when home life was difficult, Deja held on tightly to her sense of joy and creativity. At just 13 years old, she even started her own YouTube channel, sharing goofy, lighthearted videos. It was an early reflection of her outgoing spirit and the way she connected with people. Despite challenges at home, including her father's ongoing struggles with addiction and violence, Deja excelled academically. She attended Southwest High School, where she became known not just for her intelligence, but also for her dedication and leadership. Deja was part of the Early College Academy, a program that allowed her to earn a college degree while still in high school. By the spring of 2016, she was preparing to graduate as salutatorian of her class, an extraordinary achievement. She was also involved in countless extracurricular activities: track and field, volleyball, basketball, cheerleading, orchestra, and student leadership groups. Teachers described her as the kind of student who lifted others up, someone who believed in the best in people no matter what. One of her friends later described her as a rose that grew from concrete, echoing the famous poem by Tupac Shakur. Despite obstacles, she had blossomed into a remarkable young woman. And yet, behind her determination, there was always a thread of concern: her relationship with her father, Jerry Bosby. To understand the tragedy that would later unfold, it is important to understand the man at the center of it. Jerry Bosby's history of violence and instability stretched back decades. Court documents revealed a long record dating back to 1994, including substance abuse problems, repeated DUI arrests, and domestic violence. In 2005, when Deja was only 8 years old, Jerry admitted to assaulting a family member, an incident so violent it included throwing a television. He violated restraining orders, struggled with drug addiction, and cycled in and out of correctional facilities. Even during these periods of absence, Jerry expressed conflicting emotions. In a letter to a judge while serving time in 2006, he wrote about missing his children deeply and wanting forgiveness. Despite these sentiments, his pattern of violence and instability continued. By 2008, Jerry and Deja's mother officially divorced. Deja primarily lived with her mother and siblings, but she still maintained a connection with her father, hoping, perhaps against all odds, that he could change. And this is one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the story. Deja, even at 18, still believed in her father's ability to heal, to turn his life around, and to reconnect with his children in a healthy way. Friends later suggested that the reason she agreed to meet with him in March 2016 was likely tied to this hope, that she wanted to convince him to seek help for his addiction. It was an act of compassion, consistent with her character. But tragically, that compassion would place her in harm's way. On the evening of Sunday, March 20th, Deja had just returned home from her shift at Foot Locker. She was still wearing her work uniform when she received a call from her father. Jerry picked her up not long after. Security footage later confirmed that by 9:30 p.m., he had checked into the 4 Acres Motel on Hickman Mills Drive, renting room 253. The cameras captured Deja walking into the room with him. For the next 6 hours, no one else entered or exited the room. Then, at 3:30 a.m., Jerry was recorded leaving the motel on foot, later appearing at a nearby convenience store. He never returned to the motel. It would not be until the following day, March 21st, that a housekeeper discovered Deja's body inside the motel room. At this point, for the sake of responsible reporting, we will avoid discussing unnecessary detail about the condition of the room or her injuries. Instead, it is important to focus on what followed: the investigation, the trial, and the lessons this case left behind. From the very beginning, investigators focused on Jerry Bosby. Surveillance footage, witness reports, and forensic evidence quickly pointed in his direction. Jerry initially claimed that he had only rented the room for Deja and her friends, and that he had left after 20 minutes when his car wouldn't start. But the 6 hours of uninterrupted camera footage proved otherwise. Further forensic testing also contradicted his claims. The Kansas City Crime Lab found conclusive DNA evidence tying him directly to the crime. By September 2016, just 6 months after Deja's death, prosecutors had gathered enough evidence to formally charge Jerry Bosby with first-degree murder, incest, and sexual assault. The community was devastated. Teachers, classmates, and neighbors mourned the loss of a young woman whose future was so bright. Vigils were held, and her school reserved an honorary diploma for her at graduation. But the wheels of justice would take time. Nearly 3 years passed before the trial officially began. In July 2019, the trial opened in Jackson County. Over 4 days, the prosecution presented a detailed case built on forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and Jerry's own contradictory statements. One of the most impactful moments came when prosecutor Jean Peters Baker illustrated how long Deja must have struggled. She set a timer for 30 seconds, the average time it takes for someone to lose consciousness without air, and explained to the jury that death by strangulation could take several minutes more. "This is how long she fought," she told the court. It was a powerful reminder of the suffering Deja endured and the cruelty of the crime. Jerry's defense attempted to argue that the relationship may have been consensual, a claim that shocked and outraged both the courtroom and the community. But the weight of DNA evidence, combined with Jerry's history and the surveillance footage, left little room for doubt. In September 2019, Jerry Bosby was found guilty. He was sentenced to 2 life terms plus additional years for related charges. Throughout the trial and sentencing, he showed little emotion, and in his final statement, he appeared to deflect responsibility, framing himself as a victim of circumstances rather than acknowledging his actions. For Deja's family, classmates, and teachers, the loss was unbearable. Her sister described their childhood as hell on earth, but also remembered Deja as a source of joy and determination. At her high school graduation, a seat was saved for her, and her mother accepted her honorary diploma. Later, a memorial garden was created in her honor at Penn Valley, where flowers were planted to symbolize her lasting impact. Her story became a rallying point for discussions about child safety, domestic violence prevention, and the importance of listening to warning signs. While this case is heartbreaking, it is also instructive. There are important lessons that can help communities prevent similar tragedies. 1. Recognize warning signs. Jerry's history of violence, substance abuse, and restraining orders were clear red flags. When such patterns exist, family members and community institutions must take them seriously and act swiftly. 2. Support systems for at-risk youth. Deja, despite her academic success, carried the burden of trying to fix her father. Young people should never feel responsible for repairing the destructive behavior of adults. Schools, mentors, and communities must provide safe spaces and resources. 3. The role of surveillance and forensics. This case highlights how critical technology and forensic science are in uncovering the truth. Without surveillance footage and DNA evidence, justice may not have been possible. 4. Listening to young voices. Children and teenagers often sense danger before adults do. Creating open channels of communication, where their fears are respected rather than dismissed, is essential for prevention. 5. Community awareness. Sharing stories like Deja's, as painful as they are, ensures that society learns and remembers. Awareness can spark early intervention, policy change, and cultural shifts around how we view family violence. The story of Jerry Bosby is not just about a tragedy. It is about a young woman who embodied resilience, joy, and ambition despite difficult circumstances. Her life reminds us of what can be achieved through determination. Her loss reminds us of the importance of vigilance, awareness, and prevention. To honor Deja's memory, we must commit to creating safer communities, supporting at-risk families, and ensuring that children never feel responsible for protecting themselves from adults who should be their protectors. If you found this story meaningful, I encourage you once again to subscribe, like, and share. Your engagement helps us bring forward more stories that matter, not for sensationalism, but for awareness, education, and prevention. Deja's story will never be forgotten. And by telling it, we ensure that her light continues to shine.